Welcome to the UK Democracy Network's first AI and Democracy webinar, and thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. So this session is being recorded and will be made available to Democracy Network members. So if you're watching this recording after the event has taken place, then a very warm welcome to you too. We'll be fielding questions as part of this webinar, but if you're watching this back at a later date and have any questions, then please do feel free to get in touch and we'll do our best to answer them for you. My name is James Moulding, and I'm the UK Democracy Network's Network Development Lead. The UK Democracy Network works to strengthen the relationships and connections between organisations, projects and individuals working to build a healthier democracy in the UK, providing you with the resources, information and collaboration opportunities to take your work to the next level. We are a UK-wide network spanning Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland and England, and membership is free and open to all working on or around issues of democracy, power and voice in the United Kingdom. So as I said, I think this is our first AI and Democracy webinar, and we'll be running these regular webinars, providing you, the organisations, projects, campaigners and practitioners of the democracy sector with the tools, concepts and learning from experts within and outside of the democracy movement in the UK. In today's session, we'll be looking at how collective intelligence can enhance our democracy with our guest speaker and co-host of these and future AI and Democracy webinars, Bella Roberts. Bella is the founder of Antiparty, a pro-democracy movement looking to transcend the two-party system by applying collective intelligence for systems change. Previously, Bella was a London Assembly candidate for Londependents and spent a decade fulfilling a colourful career across multiple startups and companies. In this session, Bella will unpack their work and learnings for approximately an hour, taking us into a bit of a deep dive into exploring the impact of AI on civic engagement, deliberative processes, and truth in the information age. After Bella's talk, we'll take around 20 minutes for questions before finishing off around 4 p.m. If you have any urgent clarifying questions throughout the session, do feel free to raise your hand or use the Zoom raise hand function in the bottom panel. If you'd like to hear more about future upcoming workshops and webinars, or to get involved in the nascent AI and Democracy WhatsApp group we're setting up, or to get involved in the wider Democracy Network itself, you can let us know or sign up in the final right-hand column on the check-in spreadsheet in the chat. Just ignore that. Without any further ado, I'd like to hand over now to Bella. Thanks, Bella.
Thanks so much, James. And hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today. Super excited to be kickstarting the series of AI and Democracy webinars with the UK Democracy Network. Thanks so much for hosting, and in my capacity as the founder of Antiparty as well. We've got a pipeline of many other further colourful projects and speakers lined up, which I'll come to at the end, but happy to present to you my project on how collective intelligence can empower our democracy. And this was part of my master's dissertation project, completed just this summer. And let's dive right in. So the problem, I guess, hands up anyone in the group so far who believe that they live in a healthy democracy. And I'm thinking everyone's in the UK at the moment. I'm actually dialing in from Cairo. I've been in Egypt for the last 2 weeks on a retreat and extended my stay ever so slightly, but I'm not sure about the state of democracy here. But yeah, hands up, wherever you are, whether you believe that you live in a healthy democracy or wherever you call home. And I'll scroll through and see if I can see any hands. Right, none shooting up. I can see some frowns and perplexed faces. So yeah, I won't bemoan the stats and polls about democratic backsliding, but I really believe that there is a huge redefining and reimagining of what democracy means to us. So historically, democracy has been around for thousands of years, from ancient Greek times, as we know, but actually democracy in terms of an electoral system and voting has only been around for a few hundred years. The UN Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, post-World War II, anchored the idea of democracy in free and fair elections, with Churchill saying, "How is the word democracy to be interpreted? My idea of it is that the plain, humble, common man, just the ordinary man who keeps a wife and family, goes off to fight for his country when it's in trouble, goes to the poll at the appropriate time, puts his cross on the ballot paper, showing the candidate he wishes to be elected to parliament, that he is the foundation of democracy." So is that it? It's been defined as an infrequent cross on the ballot paper in this representative democracy that we still live in today. And as you know, the voting system itself is constantly being redrawn, potentially rigged, and very disproportionate. So moving more towards a deliberative democracy, where we see, voices matter more than votes. This is preferable in my view, and the deliberative wave of citizens' assemblies that we saw up till around the pandemic time was gathering a pace, mostly in Europe. I think England is a bit behind on that. And I haven't seen it pick up so much since the pandemic. But instead, because of the rise of the technology that we have, we are finding online deliberation to be a lot more efficient, easy and scalable. What is collective intelligence? It's generally a form of collective decision-making, problem-solving, and it can be enhanced through technology, but it's a way that multiple diverse inputs can be aggregated, sense-making, to come up with a we can actually come up with something that is majority satisfactory and come more towards a general consensus. And the political theorist Habermas talked about this public sphere, and we can compare that to a living organism. And when I think of collective intelligence, I sometimes think the murmuration of starlings. I sometimes see the mycelium networks, right? The biggest living organism on Earth. That's a very, well, you can say simplistic, but natural example of collective intelligence. So how come it's so difficult for humans in the connected and globalized world that we live in, still find it so hard to come together and come up with cooperative and consensus ways forward? How my research evolved was initially when I submitted the proposal a couple of years ago, so 2021, because it was a 2-year part-time course. The technologies available were very good at coming up with collective decision-making. But as we know, the rise of LLMs, which only came around just 7-8 months ago now, just blew out of nowhere. And I was very much researching a moving feast. And what I started to see was a lot of papers, mainly using Polis. I'm sure that a lot of people are familiar with this open source platform. First invented back in 2014 with the Taiwan digital democracy sunflower revolution. Very, very good at aggregating decisions, coming up with consensus, but maybe it's the most basic sort of example, and maybe it's more, it doesn't allow for more interaction, and it's very asynchronous. But what we saw with LLMs, I'm sure everyone here has been using ChatGPT quite a lot, it's coming up with generative content, right? So the more that we depend on AI to, aggregate, summarize, and sense make and sentiment analysis of what we're saying, what we mean, then the line is very blurred in terms of agency. Is this actually what I meant, or is this the AI suggesting something and I'm going with what the AI suggested? And I was seeing a lot of papers coming out throughout this summer, June, July, August 2023, and the word empowerment was used quite a lot. This paper here, the first screenshot, we're talking about empowering the AI agent. Meanwhile, nobody here put their hand up saying that they live in a healthy democracy. How many people here feel that they're empowered in their society and in the state they live in? Not many, I would say. So as we move more into this digital democracy, online deliberation, deliberative technologies, lest we forget what it feels like to gather in person, whether that's festivals, citizens' assemblies. There were these tents called empathy tents. I saw just examples in the US a few decades ago, where people just sit and listen to each other and, really come to understand each other's viewpoints rather than trying to get their point across and talking over one another. And obviously being in person, you can feel a more energetic presence. There's that saying, people don't remember what you said, but they remember how they made you feel, right? And I mean, how can we emulate this when we go online and do online deliberations is the question. So just a bit about my journey. I previously had a career in the city, and in 2021, and that's the first year we left the EU. It was the midst of COVID with no vaccine rollout plan. And it was also the time when the Sarah Everard case was unfolding, these Kill the Bill marches were going on. So a lot of uncertainty, civil unrest. And I just decided to take a stand. I found there was no leadership in the government. It was such dire times, and I was just seeing it in my local community in East London, queues for food banks, and there was just, yeah, I just had enough. So I saw this window of opportunity to get involved in the next election campaign for the London Assembly. And I didn't even know there was a 25 strong assembly, even though I've lived in London for 10 years. So that obviously raised the question, what are these so-called representatives doing? And do any of them represent me? I don't see them standing up for me and my community at all. So yeah, did that campaign, which is extremely, well, one of the best things I've ever done, but also one of the most scary and exhausting and exhilarating. But following that, that's when I started my master's and founded the Antiparty movement, which is really just coming out of hibernation now. And I'll share the link later in terms of the website, and feel free to ask questions at the end and get involved following this discussion. So how I framed my project, I wanted to look after doing all the research and seeing what was out there and where the trends were going and the direction that all the research was going in. I really wanted to, and this contrast, with machine versus human learning, I really wanted to look into to what extent does epistemic growth lead to empowerment? So epistemic growth meaning knowledge gains, and I split knowledge between explicit and implicit. So explicit being kind of what's obviously out there known to be true, and implicit is more a sort of subconscious knowledge that can be made explicit once you can draw it out by various ways. And then the second question is, how can AI be used to empower people participating on deliberation? I designed a Substack, which was an fully online conversation using Polis, using informative YouTube videos and links, and also a chatbot in lieu of a human. So I was trying to design a completely online conversation, and then I also did a hybrid conversation, as you can see. Yeah, with the red background there, that was at Regents Unite, where I had an in-person group where we all discussed and we could all speak in person, but we also then would log on to Polis online on our phones. I shared the link and we would submit our views and questions and all this on there. And then I also did a fully in-person discussion with the people speak in the bottom right picture. And that one, there was no Polis platform used. It was just everyone talking, and at the end, just filling out the same survey with the same questions. So I could compare the results and the experience of people deliberating either fully online and asynchronously, remotely, so not seeing each other or knowing who the other participants are. Hybrid model at Regents Unite, where we're all together synchronously and then submitting online, so the online platform is gathering our views, and then fully in person at the People Speak, where everyone was just having a chat, but there was no consolidation or technological sort of enhancement or facilitation of the conversation. And the chatbot that I put together as well with the help of Embeddables, they've just recently relaunched, based in New York. They helped me put together this chatbot where in the fully online conversation, where nobody knows who the other participants are, they could put in how they felt about the conversation at the end, and the chatbot would sort of come back saying things like, I'm hearing this, am I understanding you correctly, to give the impression of that feeling heard and feeling validated, which I think is a huge issue across democracy at the moment in terms of people not feeling like their voices are being heard. So can that be replicated by an AI online chatbot? So the indicative results, it is slightly skewed because I had a lot more people participating online, obviously, than the hybrid and in-person models. But maybe obviously the results for feeling that they fully expressed themselves and that they were fully included and felt heard was the highest, hands down, with the in-person model. Although in the fully online model, where people have more resources available to them, links, references, etc., for information, the increased interest and improved understanding results were a lot higher. And again, so that's kind of potentially to be expected. The the questions around whether people gained more perspectives of others to support their opinion was quite a close call, to be honest. I mean, the hybrid model came out top, but as you can see, the other models weren't too far behind. Understanding others' perspectives was extremely low in the fully online one because people weren't actually engaging with each other. And I think this is a common feedback just for the Polis platform in general. I think one of the qualitative comments from some participants, saying the question was something around, how did you find the conversation? And some people literally just said, what conversation? Because it was just a one-directional input. So then the other results across improved understanding of those perspectives, yes, that's highest in the hybrid. And interest to participate in a citizen assembly going forward, full participation across the hybrid. The 100% of the population wanted to get involved in a more formal capacity going forwards. Would they trust the outcome of citizen assembly more than elected representative? This was like surprisingly low. It sounded like people still would want the input of an elected representative, and questions around quality of deliberation decreasing online was the highest score on the online conversation. So the people could tell that they would prefer to have a bit more in-person interaction. The second half of my research involved having in-depth interviews with various people across the board. So I was gaining perspectives from, in alphabetical order, Ben Redhead. He's a consultant for Sortition Foundation. Mark Santolini, researcher and academic who writes a lot about collective wisdom and contemplative citizen science. Very, very interesting area. Mikey Wynkoff, so he's the lead of the People Speak over the last 25 or so years, very much just decades of experience in person facilitating, not only in the East London community, but I think global now. Tom Atlee, he's a founder of Co-Intelligence Institute across the Atlantic. He's an author, activist, and philosopher, wrote a book called The Tao of Democracy, which I'd highly recommend to anyone. And also spoke to an associate from a big tech firm who prefers to remain anonymized. And he obviously brought in the perspective from the inside of these AI firms in terms of how they view ethics and where their loyalty lies in a way between, the technology and the human participant. So I was trying to map out the themes here in a mind map of sorts. So the first interview theme that came out of all the conversations was very much, in terms of democracy, in terms of deliberation, it's very much about the collective, not the individual. So us coming together. So for example, a quote from Tom, empowering the citizen is totally different than empowering the whole system. It's a paradigm shift, but you're not depending on individuals. They're not the starting place. The whole system is the starting place. You have to deal with the whole system, and that's the unit you're working with. And then the people are in it to become a significant piece of that. And then also, a really interesting point by Mark here, in terms of asynchronous methods of participation and dialogue. He doesn't think that would work based on the historical needs of early nation states that relied on institutional religion to sort of coordinate populations, that allowed for synchronization, processes like rituals to achieve a wiser state, and actually now as we become a bit more sort of separate with more distance between us, obviously COVID was like, stand far away, where the more distance the better, not breathing. These are all kind of the opposite of what we need to really come together and understand each other. Interdependence, not independence. And there's a risk, I suppose, with the individual prioritizing their own empowerment over the empowerment of the collective. So we're all part of the whole, and how we find the way forward is actually through this collective consensus rather than what we each need and I think it's more about stripping down the layers, and we realize that actually what we all want is the same once you get down to that core, and that's why it's like how do we strip down to the to those core needs and understandings. The communities and indigenous cultures part of it came out quite a lot in the conversations, and I spent a couple of terms of my master's remotely in Bali. And noticed, linking back to the religious community point, they have their own religion on this island, and the local communities gather so frequently in their neighborhoods, men, women, children, and the expat families as well, gathering at temples. And So not only does that get people together, but it gets people together for something that's focused on or based on a sort of optimism, a hope, a belief, a positive belief. You know, I can't remember the last time I saw something like that in my neighborhood, apart from if you go to a festival. But, you know, people are gathering for marches because they're angry and upset about something. But as religion has sort of dissipated in this way, we're all very individualistic now. We're all very siloed. You know, when was the last time we come together for a social purpose that was a positive one, that, you know, garnered collective hope and a collective vision that is positive for the future? There was a quote here about collective intelligence facilitators being the new priests, which is an interesting concept potentially. But it's also good to like not commoditize, obviously, the indigenous wisdom, because I think a lot of people can use that quite lightly without really understanding. And with a lot of ancient wisdom, where, and I've been looking a lot at that here in Egypt, for example, you know, there's so much of this ancient wisdom and knowledge that we might never know, and we're just going to have to really guess with our best guess. And the second and final interview theme that I'll cover here is the culture of dialogue. So how do we speak together and how do we communicate with each other? You know, I asked a question about epistemic growth, about knowledge gains, but actually this new phrase came about, you know, about epistemic humility for welcoming the voice of the other. And actually epistemic humility being admitting or just knowing what we don't know, or knowing that there is a lot that we still don't know. You know, and that's again just a complete reversal of people always coming in usually being like, I know this, I know what I want, or I know my view of the world is the right one. You know, it's again, it's stepping back, it's stripping down. That just points around meditation as well. You know, a meditation allows for you to be an active witness, removing layers of performance and being in the face of contemplation of yourself. So that's a quote from Mark. And then bottom right, Tom spoke about the Quaker movement, or the Quakers, you know, sitting in silence, waiting on the light, discernment. So it's very interesting themes. You know, again, I had a very diverse group of interviewees, but some of the concepts they came out with, even some of the terminologies, that would be very similar, despite these people being all over the world in completely different fields. And then, yeah, even on an organizational perspective, Ben, you know, mentioned that in organizations, you can see maybe active listening being practiced in business leaders way more than political leaders. So, you know, a good business leader would say something, and this is what they'd be trained to do in organizational management, development, etc. They'll say, oh, I know what to do, but they won't say, I know what to do. They'll be like asking other people to come in. And this is contrasting to politicians, where they just say, I'm going to do this, and discounting the functional reality. And there shouldn't be a disconnect between the way people see leadership in politics and in the wider business world. So following all of these results and conversations, what started to kind of form or arise out of this was some human-centered design principles for empowering participants in online deliberation. And these can kind of spell out the acronym SAFE. So that what's included in that is space provided for silent contemplation, active listening and feeling heard, ability to change one's view, feeling connected as part of the whole, and epistemic humility. So the next question, I think it's always best to start with what's best for us, the human participants, and what's best for our human experience when we deliberate and when we are conversing with each other, and then thinking how can they best be replicated online, rather than the other way around of thinking, okay, what are the new advances in technology, and then being led by that, you know, like horse being drawn by the cart. I'm just re-entering Lucas there, but I mean, yeah, we've talked a bit about like meditation contemplation, for example, and what I forgot to mention was across all models of the conversations that were involved in my research, the fully online and the hybrid, I was able to try to introduce a few minutes of meditation before the conversation started, to see what effect that would have, and sort of grounding people and just kind of getting people present before entering the conversation. So in the online conversation, they just watched a few minutes of a meditation video, and in the Regions Unite hybrid conversation, I just led a sort of few minutes of silence there. But it'd be interesting to see across everyone here today, you know, whether they have a meditation practice or whether they've meditated before. Yeah, hands up maybe. I know there's a few apps like Calm and Headspace, which can make it slightly easier, but they always have American accents for some reason. Oh, nice. So a couple of hands. Great. Really good to see. And, you know, this term empowerment, I mean, maybe we can take a pause here and see, you know, I think a lot of us, you know, we know what it feels like to not have a voice and to not have our representatives reply, respond, or seem to represent us at all. But what does it actually mean to be empowered in this democracy? Can we even think about what that might feel like? Or is it so alien to us? If anyone would just want to put in the chat, let me know. But there is a citizens engagement model by a lady called Asasi, and she tried to describe it as, well, her way of approaching empowerment is described as an increased democratic capacity, for example, self-expression, empathy, and deliberation skills, as well as strengthened political knowledge and interest, and an increased open-mindedness to the complexity of perspectives. So as you can see, elements of that were included in my survey questions, and that's how I was testing when I was saying whether you gained more perspectives, whether you had an increased interest in the topic. These were elements to basically see whether people could feel empowered or not, without directly asking them, do you feel empowered? Because clearly it's not an obvious sensation for us in democracy or in our societies right now. So overall, you know, that I really saw, as we try to reimagine democracy, there's a potentially new ontology, a new rephrasing and redefining of things. So public sphere from Habermas can be, you know, the new collective intelligence. We talk about common ground, and then actually we can talk about grounding. And the other, the away, you know, the distance between us and that it space, and just treating the other as this, you know, foreign object. And actually in the day, it's maybe a reflection of ourselves, can actually be seen as this I space and we space. Contemplative citizen science and contemplative action. We can go from judging to presencing, reaction to reflection, epistemic growth to epistemic humility, and echo chambers, as you know, we see that in social media, to a resonance chamber, and moving from collective intelligence and transcending that into a collective consciousness or collective wisdom. And there's a lot more to be said about collective wisdom in Tom Atlee's work. So maybe I'll stop there, but there was a sort of, yeah, these are some recommended reading lists, which I really enjoyed referring to. And there was also like a slide with this poem about Tree of Life, which I was going to add in, but I thought maybe it'd be too woo-woo. But yeah, it was just kind of maybe referring to, you know, all the different leaves on the tree and how like they might seem separate or far away from each other, but again, all connected to the same source. Even if it seems like someone is further away and looks different to you, different position to you, we're actually all connected to the same unifying source. And it's really just trying to find that again, especially in this world where it's so uncertain and hard to trust, you know, what we read, and therefore that information which we're using to make, that we're bringing into these conversations and using to make decisions. It's really, again, just let's strip back down to what makes us human, what makes us engage and interact with each other on a level playing field. And yeah, and I think that would really improve our understanding and tolerance, and ultimately, yeah, consensus and peace. So it might seem like a very far away, but I think, you know, these are steps in the right direction. So yeah, maybe I'll pause there and see if there is any comments or questions at this point. So I think there's a comment in the chat. Agree, democracy must have more collective bargaining. Transparency is key. It must be present and voices must be visible to get involved. Yes, definitely. But yeah, I think it's, you know, this is just the start. Ultimately, I found that, you know, a lot of things I expected to, my research just changed so much from the initial proposal to where we stand today. And as you know, yeah, in the age of AI, it's more and more important that we distinguish what makes us distinctly human. And, you know, especially if we're starting to talk about AI having consciousness, you know, do we even know what consciousness is? How have we accessed our own consciousness? And this is, yeah, this is what I'd like to hold on to as we move into this increasingly digital age, and hence the human-centered design principles, which I'd like to develop further in future. So yeah, let's watch this space. But yeah, we've got a few hands. Valerie.
Thank you. Do I call you Professor Roberts?
I wish. I mean, if someone wants to hire me to lecture, absolutely, let me know.
No, that was really good, insightful, better than some of the seminars I've been to. So thank you for that. I took loads of notes. I just want to know your perspective in terms of if AI, because it's kind of like being portrayed at the moment as this big, mean kind of monster that's going to just wipe us all out. But my thing is very specific in terms of it being sort of gender specific, almost like wiping out the ageist population that aren't as savvy on tech, and then almost like as well the kind of the Black minority ethnic perspective in terms of often programs aren't facilitating us to get involved in political activism or just policy making, etc. So I hope that makes sense. I just want to just kind of put that to you, in a sort of question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Valerie, and thanks so much for joining and for bringing that perspective to the table. I mean, obviously that's hugely important. Yes, there is, the way it's portrayed in the media, the biases that proliferate it are huge issues. And they persist. But I mean, being aware of them is the first step. And I would say that, obviously the media is always hyperbolizing, if that's even a word, like everything that can. AI isn't new. I think there's been a lot of movies and news about AI from decades ago. So it really isn't, now the biggest development, like most recently, is the LLMs, like specifically, and the more generative AI. So that's what we've got to look out for. And what that comes with is, wanting to know the origin of content and the source of information, and therefore finding what is ultimately true, if the ultimate truth actually exists. And yeah, I mean, there has been stories about bias in the AI, in that content that's been generated. Like when you ask it questions and you let it go off and one, I mean, that's something to ask, the people in the AI firms themselves developing it, and it's the content that it's being fed. And if the data that exists in the world, I mean, there's that book, isn't it, like Invisible Women or something, and how like, a lot of everything that's been designed is more around men, like even like seatbelts or gym equipment, it's all around the frameworks or metrics of a human man. So, if the data we're feeding it, the AI in this world is going to be biased, then the outputs will be as well, unfortunately. I hope that answers your question. I'm sure there's a much bigger discussion on that for another time, but happy to continue the conversation outside. And Artem, do you have a question as well?
Yeah, thank you, Bella. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, I can hear you. Thanks.
Okay, good. So I'm wondering, what do you think are the main threats of AI in democracy or for democracy? And if I may, I would just share one of my fears, which is basically using AI to do something similar to what they tried to do with Cambridge Analytica. Actually, maybe it's not the same thing, but like personalized influencing, like, using AI to like craft personalized messages for campaigning or something else. I think that's a very big threat. I'm wondering, what do you think can be done to protect ourselves from it? And maybe you can think of some other threats that we should be mindful of. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, what's that saying when they said, those who forget history are destined to repeat it, in terms of Cambridge Analytica. Of course, like the technology, like our phones and all the technology that we use, our devices, etc. They have our facial recognition, they have our voices, they have all our messages, they have our connections, they have our photos, every information and now that generative AI is so powerful and so good at creating even imagery, etc. But although voice is really maybe all that's needed, or even text, someone could message pretending to be you, and what's the recipient going to know the difference? I think, you know, underlying all of that and the risk of that going awry is ownership of that data. And I think that's the key point, right? Because that shouldn't be legal, because our devices or the technology that we use shouldn't have free reign to replicate and use our, you know, voices, data, etc., to impersonate us. And I mean, without going to there's a Jonah's awful Black Mirror episode, for example, and Black Mirror does seem to predict the future quite a lot, unfortunately. But it goes back down to ownership of data, and that's actually a key chapter or campaign line that I want to address with Antiparty. So we can also continue the conversation on that front. But yeah, I think that goes down to data sovereignty, to be honest with you. And actually, when did you ask about solutions? Because on the flip side, a more sort of wide field solution to not only prevent AI using our personhood and data for these manipulative reasons, but actually if we reclaimed like sovereignty over our data and personal information, we can also monetize that, because all these marketing companies are using that for free and selling it and, you know, making money on our behalf. Well, no, not on our behalf, on us, like, right? So again, there's so much that's out of our control, and all these things out of our control without us giving the active choice for these things to be going on, again, goes back down to democracy. So this is the whole system that we unfortunately live in, and that's why it's really about system redesign as well. And that's why, yeah, it's very interesting. But yeah, thanks for raising that point, Artem.
Yeah, I've shared the recent tweet from Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, and he says that AI gets really, really persuasive really, really soon. So I don't know if I'm more excited or anxious about that.
Yeah, well, there was a Ipsos Mori, survey just this year, a global survey on attitudes to AI, and I remember seeing, I think Indonesia was like second highest of like feeling very excited and confident with the use of AI, and the UK was second to worst in terms of we're feeling very nervous about AI. And again, you know, that's how it's portrayed in the media. I mean, again, like trying to flip our approach and perspective from, you know, a position of fear and a position of uncertainty, you know, and this goes back to, what does it feel like to be empowered? Do we live in what does democracy actually, a healthy democracy, even mean to us? It's actually imagining, okay, can AI be used for good? And, you know, there's things like, what if there was a benevolent AI leader, or, you know, and considering the state of our politicians right now, all right, and the slew of PMs we've had in the UK, I wouldn't be surprised if people would much rather have a benevolent AI leading things in terms of trust, in terms of a fresh start, in terms of a new, new change, right? So we can't always assume that the AI is going to be, you know, bad just because that's what the media portrays it as.
Yeah. Can I add something else, or I'm taking too much time? I've just also been thinking about, you know, using just generative AI to generate, like emails to your council or some other like public servants.
Yeah.
Basically, like ChatGPT enables people to do that really, really quickly, and so the sheer volume of those requests or complaints will be so big that the public servants will have to use AI just to process all those complaints. So basically, you know, AI will be complaining to AI, and I don't know, maybe it'll be a strange world, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see more, you know, AI being used to enhance the processes within government, and within, you know, e-government, for example. I know that I think the UK government did have a collective intelligence department, which seemed to be quite good on the sort of policy making and policy design front. I think they use Polis too, actually. So, again, but as we probably know, but I don't know if anyone here has experience in like civil service or public servant type roles, but generally the impression is that adoption of technology in these departments is way behind, the startup space or private companies in the same city, like in London, for example, there's a huge gap and when arguably, public service is probably most needed for these enhancements. No, super interesting. And so someone's added into the chat as well that the Electoral Commission are currently testing an LLM chatbot to query electoral law, mainly for charities ahead of the next general election. Yeah, really interesting. Because as well as being generative, I think people have been using it to, maybe find bits of information in like tons of text, and summarizing. And obviously, when applied to legal and legislative documents, obviously that's very helpful. You probably might want to double check everything in case, again, it's assumed or interpreted something. Exactly. Make sure it doesn't hallucinate electoral law. You don't want to be going off on the wrong track. But I think there were some projects similar to or doing this within the within our AI and democracy WhatsApp group. So hopefully there could be a webinar specifically on this, on a project like this coming up. And there's lots of exciting things in the pipeline because there's quite a few people working on I think even in the group now working on very exciting things linked to the space. So keep tuned on the following weeks, and I think it's great just to know everyone's aware of what everyone's up to, so that we can join forces and knowledge share, because this is a collective problem to be addressed with collective solutions and collective efforts rather than working in silos. So James has just reposted the link to the WhatsApp chat there. If you haven't joined already, please do. But so thanks so much for everyone for joining. And I mean, if everyone has any sort of final thoughts, either on either the state of democracy or the use of AI, or even has anyone been involved in a citizen assembly, or how they feel about legislation being formed with an online deliberation assembly? Do you think that would be as effective? These are all questions, because it is to do with trust, it is to do with legitimacy. So the first step is processing all of this and making sure it's functional and works, and the technology will get us there. But then we also need to trust it in order for it to go through. Thanks, Rosemary.
What's your vision for this group? I mean, apart from the chatting about interesting stuff, do you have any activities in mind, or what are you planning to do
for the AI and Democracy group?
Yeah,
I mean, James, feel free to jump in here as well. Initially it's really just gathering all these sources and networks, just really growing this mycelium network of people working in this space. And I'm sure there's going to be in-person events coming up soon. These webinars will be added to a channel, so we'll have these recordings of all these projects going on. Thanks, Frankie. And then in terms of activities, we can probably mobilize some sort of campaign at some point. As we know, the UK is hosting the AI Safety Summit very soon. I mean, exactly, even next week. So there's a lot happening in space all the time. And I think, just being aware of the developments, but also it's important, and that's why these conversations and discussions are important, and everyone's attendance and engagement here, because we really need to have a view on what we believe is right, or what should be going on, because otherwise decisions are going to be made for us, right? And this is why it goes back to reclaiming our agency and feeling empowered in this so-called democracy that we live in.
Yeah, just to jump in, and thanks so much, Isabella. Really, really good, really interesting session. I think a lot of other people appreciated too, judging by the comments in the chat. on the AI and democracy, just to jump back a sec, I think it was the start of the summer. There were quite a few conversations around New Speak House in central London, around thanks Marcus on behalf of Isabella. Yeah, there was a lot of conversations around AI and democracy, and noticing that the conversations that were being had were not being had very like systematically or at like an organized level. There was like blog posts over here and webinars over here, and there aren't that many spaces that are bringing together these in this kind of focused way. I'm not saying that this is necessarily the space that's doing that in a focused way, but trying to encourage people to think about this in that sense. There was a previous series of events about 3 years ago or 5 years ago now that did something similar, and it's just trying to provoke those conversations, particularly in the UK, where we have a situation where the government isn't really interested in regulating any of these new technologies. But yeah, it's the start of I think it's the start of a long journey. I think there's an idea to run sort of physical events. Isabella is kindly offered to host a series of webinars. So next week, on Thursday, on the 2nd of November. So Isabella will be hosting. Isabella will be in conversation with Flynn Devine from Recursive Public, who just won the massive OpenAI grant, which is really exciting to hearing about what they're working on. Flynn's a member of the network. And then in the coming weeks after that, we'll be continuing those discussions. I think that's every 2 weeks. Yeah, so we'll see where this goes. If you've got your own ideas about what you want to see from this OpenAI network, from the AI and democracy group, feel free to. We can talk about it now. We're just about to close up, or on the WhatsApp group. So please do join us on the WhatsApp group or join UK Democracy Network. We'd love to have those conversations with you. So we've got 4 minutes left. Have we got any further questions?
Questions, comments, thoughts, things I'd like to share, things that came to mind.
Exciting news.
Any ideas, maybe? But yeah, no, we're building a community here, so please join the WhatsApp group and just put anything. Yeah, Valerie?
Just, I guess from my own observation, I do watch a lot of movies, been on the spectrum, very proud of my sort of sci-fi knowledge. Just the dangers. I mean, we're looking at a kind of, I feel, a micro kind of level, and the macro, I feel, is going to be with like the nuclear stuff. And my real worry, again, when you have these mechanisms that can bypass or override humans, is that we're looking at I don't know how to say this, but I just feel there's positives to AI. I've seen it during the pandemic where machines have been used to run medicines to homes and all that kind of stuff, that kind of small level stuff. But my real fear is when it gets into the wrong hands. Not just the data side, but the stuff where you could literally obliterate the human race. So I don't know if you have anything to just. I don't want to end on a down low, but sorry, on the down. Sorry,
yeah,
not down low.
It's going so well.
But do you have any sort of thoughts, just please, from a female perspective as well?
Invest in bunkers. No, I'm joking. I would say the best way to approach this is it's our mindset. This risk is always there. There's always a risk of an earthquake, natural disasters, like acts of God, right? And it's like, do we want to live every day of our lives in fear and worry of the precious time we have on this earth with each other, in fear and being concerned and worried about this, rather than, again, just kind of shifting to a more like positive outlook? And we really need to unite in hope and love and peace these days, than because what sparks out of fear is the fundamental it's a fundamental source of a lot of other negative behaviors and actions, right? a lot of these things stem from fear, and on the international level, you know, you talk about the arms race, Cold War, and all this. It's fear of the other developing weapons better than us, and the, you know, space race. Oh, they're going to get there before. And again, this is all this mindset stemming from, yeah, of this fear, and why, you know, if it was based on trust, if it was based on the trust and understanding, and that's why. So that's on a very macro level, and on a very micro level, I suppose this is what I was trying to get to with my project, in terms of when, you know, when we come together to deliberate on an issue, on a problem, on a local community level, you know, it has to be based on trust and understanding, and not fear of the other. So I think that we need a collective effort in shifting the mindset towards that.
Okay, and on that note, so I just want to say thank you to Isabella for a fantastic presentation, and thank you to all of you for your questions and for being here today. And I really look forward to seeing you all again soon. Please do join the WhatsApp group. Please do come again, and we'll be sending around a feedback form in about half an hour. So please do let us know what you really think in half an hour. Yeah, thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you so much. So good to see everyone. And thank you for your questions and discussion. I really enjoyed speaking with you today. So yeah, please keep in touch. This is only the beginning.